Welcome to the Hey Docs podcast with your host, Jill Allen. Today, I am catching up with one of my favorite startup stories with Dr. Elisabeth Yenidjeian. We worked together to bring her startup vision to life in Asheville. But what makes her journey truly incredible is everything she overcame to get there. From unexpected health battles to construction nightmares, she's been through it all, and she came out on the other side with a thriving practice and a heart still full of passion for what she does. If you're in the middle of a startup and feeling overwhelmed, this episode is here to remind you you're not alone and you can do this. This episode was brought to you by Gray Finch. Hey docs, if you want to have a great business, the right practice management software is essential. But some can be slow, outdated, and lacking good support. That's why I recommend Gray Finch to all orthodontists. It's the fastest, most reliable, and most secure platform to grow your business and improve your efficiency. It's completely web-based, so you can run your entire practice anywhere and from any device with no servers, no downloads, or hidden fees. They even have the most helpful and responsive support team around. Right now, Gray Finch is giving a $500 discount to our listeners. Visit grayfinch.com/Jill Allen to learn more and see why it's one of the fastest growing providers in America. Liz, I am so excited to have you on Hey Docs. Thanks for being here today.
No, thank you so much, Jill, for inviting me. This is pretty big honor right now. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yes. What I would like to do is I would like you to just give us how you got to where you're at right now. Give us a little bit of history before we met, before the budget, before the build out, before the initial call. Let's just talk about yourself, your dream to becoming an orthodontist, and kind of where you started to where you're at now. Just to let the audience know.
No, for sure. It is a very interesting journey. I wasn't always dreaming of being an orthodontist. I always joke that I fell into dentistry by accident. And so I originally am from New York. I grew up right outside the city, a big family. I have 3 sisters. My youngest sister is autistic. We have a 15-year age gap, and I've always been really big into her care, which comes into play a little bit later.
Yep.
But I've always been a person that had a million hobbies growing up. And one of the biggest things I do is I love to bake. I've always been into creative passions, ceramics and art and things like that, but have always been fascinated with science and healthcare, and didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life for a while. And very aimless 18-year-old me just decided to go to a crazy liberal arts school out in the middle of Vermont that had no grades or requirements, and basically focused in ceramics and chemistry at the same time. And the college that I went to was required for you to get an internship every year. So we had to go and leave campus and try and get a job. And I was scrambling. I just couldn't figure out what I wanted. And I was a broke college student, so I needed to try and live at home with my parents, and just couldn't find a job that fit into what my educational plan might want to be. And so my mother had just brought my sister back from a dental visit and was talking about me, like, hey, Liz is coming home. She's trying to find a job. And he was like, I'll give her a job. And so I was like, okay, I'll do that. And I wound up going and meeting with him. And I was like, I'll just shadow you. You don't have to pay me or anything. And he was like, oh no, I'm going to put you to work. I'm going to make you my assistant. And I wound up staying on there. And I started, it was a pediatric dental practice, and was doing an eight-week internship with him. And within a few days, I very quickly fell in love just with every aspect of it. There was so much wonderful things. There's an art to it. You get to hang out with awesome people all day, and you get to make them feel better, and you get to do this service. And there's a lot of multitasking, and it was keeping me on my feet. And I just found it incredibly interesting. And by the end of my internship, he pulled me into his office and just sat me down and was like, Liz, you have to go to dental school. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm going to dental school. And so that's what happened. And then I went to dental school, and I went to dental school in Yenidjeian, New Jersey. started off thinking I was going to do pediatrics. And then once I learned about all the other stuff, then I was like, oh man, I want to do pros, or maybe I want to do surgery. And then the funny thing was, is that ortho was my absolute least favorite thing in dental school. And to be fair, truthfully, you're getting just like a small picture of it. And so it's a little hard to really wrap your head around all the nuances of it. And so I wasn't sure. I was leaning towards, like I said, surgery or so. And so I decided to do a pretty rigorous general practice residency. And I wound up going to Jacoby Medical Center, which is a massive level 1 trauma center in the Bronx. And my first year there, they had just started a craniofacial program and a craniofacial and orthodontic surgery fellowship for orthodontists. It was the first year I was there. And while I was doing my residency, I very quickly started looking at what orthodontics actually is and what it entails. And I was like, this stuff is so cool. And then I realized like how much of a big picture art project it was. And I was thinking about it and I was like, you know what? I think I really want to do this stuff. I was like, I want to do all this crazy stuff. And so I decided to go and be an orthodontist. And so I applied and I luckily got in. And I knew while I was in my ortho residency that I wanted to go back to Jacoby to learn more about what was going on. And after I finished my residency, I applied for the fellowship. They were like, yeah, come on back. Welcome back. And so I wound up completing a 2-year craniofacial fellowship while I was there. And during my time, I was basically treating anything and everything that you can possibly imagine, from trauma to orthodontics to cleft palate care. I took an impression on a baby in the NICU with my pinky to make NAM appliances. And it was just some of the most rewarding things that I could ever imagine. And I loved it so much. During that time, while I was in the fellowship, I was working in private practice. And that was also like really helpful. And I was able to see like the outside sort of hospital-based dentistry out of that. And I did that both at the same time. And then when I was done with my fellowship, I was asked to stay on. And so I was invited to stay on as the clinical attending for both the fellowship. And then eventually they asked me to take over the pedo ortho curriculum for the pediatric residents. And so I was basically teaching other orthodontists and then teaching pediatric residents how to do interceptive orthodontics. And it was like my favorite days. And one of the other things too is that being that I had an autistic sister, I've always had a really strong affiliation for special needs care. And I was able to do that quite a bit at Jacoby. And I became a liaison for special needs patients for all of the departments there. And so it was incredibly wonderful. And I'm so grateful for my time there. But then eventually I was working for quite a few years there, and I started reaching a point where I realized that I wasn't very happy in New York anymore. It was just really wearing me down. I was working 2 separate jobs, multiple different locations, and a lot of traveling. And it really wasn't something that was fit into my lifestyle. And my husband and I were both very like chill, low key people. And we started realizing that we needed to maybe find another outlet, and maybe staying in New York wasn't for us the whole time. But I was really worried that I was going to be leaving the craniofacial team and all that stuff. And I think that's what kind of kept me in New York for so long, because I felt like I was going to miss it so much. But as I eventually came to the decision to open a practice, I knew that I wanted it to be able to include all of the things that I loved doing, and not necessarily in a hospital setting all the time. And that's always the tough thing, is that a lot of those types of cases, they usually wind up getting referred to hospitals or clinics, and it's because they're deemed too complex. Yeah. And I really wanted to build a place where I could provide access to care, where it was a private practice setting, and I will treat anything and everything that I feel capable doing. And that was really one of the big decisions. And I think the other part of it was that I just wanted to throw in a little artistic flair as well. And because I've always, like I said, I've always had a little bit of an off the beaten path. And that's really really what it was. And I also wanted to be able to find a place that was very sensory friendly and calm, and something that special needs patients could come and feel comfortable. Because sometimes orthodontic offices, if they're big and they're busy, it's very overstimulating for them. And so I wanted to try and incorporate all of these things into my practice. And I knew that I wanted to stay on the smaller side for that reason. And I was very clinical based, very patient care based. And I just wanted to make sure that was what was the main focus of my practice. And so, yeah, that's the whole spiel of it.
Yeah.
Or a chunk of it.
Yeah, and what's fun is I can remember our first calls and when you were
Yeah.
like, "Okay, I think I'm ready to do this," and making the
Yeah.
decision on where you're going to practice and how it's all going to go. And so I do want to, for the audience, because your story is so incredible, and I think it's just from how you got started to what happened in your first year startup, all of that into second year. But I'm curious if you can just talk a little bit about, as you were making that decision to transition out of New York into where you're practicing now, and just talk a little bit about that, because I think for a lot of doctors, it is very scary when you're in that, I don't know, that churn of that role, whether it's an associateship position or what you were doing in more of a hospital setting or what. It's very scary, I think, to number one, make that decision to make that change, but then to also go, oh my gosh, I'm going to be betting on myself here on what I'm going to do, and all these visions of how I want to do my practice, as you were saying, and how do I truly incorporate that into what I am doing? I'm wondering if you can just talk about your decision a little bit more, and then the location, and just what it was like when we made that decision and then you opened up, because I think this is where not so fun for you at the time, but let's talk about, kind of what
Absolutely.
that looked like.
That's another fun story. Throughout my career, and I think I told you, like, I was so patient based that for a very long time, people would ask me constantly, like, when are you going to open a practice? When are you going to open a practice? And years go by, and the question kept coming up. And truthfully, in my mind, I felt like I didn't want one at all. It was just not for me. I loved doing what I was doing. I loved not having to think about all the other stuff. I just wanted to focus on patient care. And I think there's a lot of young doctors that sometimes feel that way because the idea of owning a practice is so incredibly scary. And some of the other things that I felt hindered me from making that decision earlier is that I didn't feel like I was confident to be able to take care of that type of stuff. I didn't understand the business side of it. I was like, I could do lots of ortho. I was like, what are taxes? So it's like things like that. And so for a really long time, I think I really kept telling myself that. And truly, it was a self-perpetuating thing that I was just keeping in my mind. And I think the other thing too that I was very scared about was that because I was so patient focused, and that owning a practice is essentially also owning a business, that I became very worried that part of that would affect the way that I was treating people. And I became worried that was something that would start changing my treatment decisions. And again, I was young and naive and all that stuff. And then as I got older and I got more experienced, I realized that you don't have to be that way. You really don't. You make the decision on what you want your practice to be, what's important, what are your priorities.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, yes, it is a business and it is something that has to run, but stay true to yourself. And I think that is one of the things that will always make you feel better about everything that you're going through, whether it's awful or wonderful. As long as you know that you're doing the right thing, I think that's really valuable. And the other thing that really came down to me making the decision was that it was a couple things. I was working in private practice, and the craniofacial team was part-time. It eventually became only one day a week as I stayed in New York. And I was working for other orthodontists that were wonderful. I was with them for many years, but I was still in a box. And it's not, like I said, that is what an associateship is. And you were working in the confines of what the owner doctor wants for the practice, which is completely understandable. And I eventually started realizing that I wanted to be able to do more of what I wanted to do and the types of treatments that I wanted to do. And I wasn't going to be able to do that unless I finally did it for myself. And so that was a very large part of it, is just taking that time, realizing that I was getting very stagnant with how I was progressing, and I was feeling it. I was starting to feel a little run down, a little burnt out, because I just was still trying to work into the confines of what I needed to be. And I think there's probably lots of doctors out there that eventually get to that point. And when that point comes, I think that's the tipping point for a lot of people, where you have to sit there and mull it over. And the problem is that mulling over can take a while. You can go back and forth very easily. And then I think the other thing that really was the big deciding factor was that my last few years while I was in New York, I was approached by NYU Langone. They had an ortho residency there that they were planning on closing, and they needed someone to perform a teach out for the residency that had surgical and craniofacial experience. And so they had asked me to come on and basically be an interim director there as they're attending, making sure they were fulfilling all their quota requirements. But then the other caveat was that I would be in charge of then turning the clinic that the residency was using into a private practice model that was functional for NYU Langone. And it was incredibly challenging. And about halfway through it, I wound up sitting down and looking, and it became very successful. We were able to do the teach out. We were able to switch it over to the private practice model. And then I was thinking to myself, I just did this for other people. I was like, I think I can do it. I was like, all right, maybe I can do this. I was like, I just did it once. Maybe I can do it again. And that's really what happened. So like I said, it's a bunch of factors. But yeah, getting over that fear is incredibly tough. Yeah. There's so many things that go through your mind, like imposter syndrome, and like you hear that all the time, and just the unknowns. And that's really the terrifying thing about life, is when you do something for the first time, it's always terrifying because you have no idea what to expect. But then the tough part is that if you never make any decisions because you're always terrified of what's going to happen, then you're just going to stay in place. And that's really where I went to in my career. And I reached that point where I'm like, I have been staying in place a lot longer than I should have been. But I have no regrets, because I needed that time and I needed that maturity, life experience before I really felt truly ready to go through with it. And I think doing the thing at NYU was just like, I was like, okay, let's go.
As you and I talked, and as I have talked, as you said, there are many doctors who are in that situation where it is really scary to think about, I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to go from 0 to whatever number that number is going.
Oh yeah. And it's like Monopoly numbers, Monopoly money numbers. Like at that point, it's like your eyes glaze over and you're like, how much money am I spending? And so it's absolutely terrifying. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So let's fast forward. Make the decision to bet on yourself. We go through the process of getting a practice set up, get the doors open. And let's talk about what happens specifically for you and just adversity as a whole, overcoming adversity. Let's talk about that.
All of it. So from the beginning, I was opening a practice at a distance. So that was the other thing too. My husband and I decided we wanted to move to Asheville. And I knew at this point, like, we were taking this big move. And I wanted to do this for myself and my family and everybody. And Asheville wound up being the place for us because it was such a wonderful community. And we had been visiting for a very long time on and off. And every time I went down there, it was just all of my anxiety went away. And I just felt like this is the life pace that I want. But I wasn't down there yet. And so I then had to start this process, basically living in another state, still working 6 days a week in New York City, but trying to manage all of this at the same time. And eventually started the process of getting a loan, getting approved for the loan, trying to find real estate. Trying to find real estate when I am not there is incredibly challenging. And so during those initial times, I had to rely a lot on my broker, who was absolutely wonderful, and my consulting contractor, who was doing a lot of the helpful work in the beginning, and just reaching out to friends that live down here and be like, hey guys, can you go scope the space out and tell me everything's okay? And so there was a lot of that going on. And eventually we found a space. So I initially found a space that seemed like it was going to be a really great fit. It was a right-ish size that I wanted in a good location. And so went through lease negotiations again at a distance. My contractor scoped out the place and he was like, okay, everything looks okay. And then we wound up signing a lease. And then very shortly after we signed a lease, my contractor went there to do an initial scope out before we were going to start construction. And he gave me a call and he was like, hey, Liz. And he was like, there's another construction crew inside of this space right now. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he was like, yeah, they're inside the space and they're building a French drain inside of the space on the back wall. And immediately I was like,
Hold the phone.
I'm like, hold on. I call my broker. My broker is like, what the heck are you talking about? And so then he's talking to the other broker and then it's back and forth. And so we find out that the landlord did not disclose previous flooding in the space. And so he was preemptively placing a French drain inside of the space that was going to prevent some of the flooding, but it was also going to decrease my square footage by many hundred square feet. And we had already had a floor plan and everything. And so it wound up turning into a legal battle. Unfortunately, and this is just right off the bat. First space, had to hire a lawyer, wound up having to spend some money, break the lease, and was back to square one.
Yep.
And yes, that was not fun. Like you make that decision, you're like, oh, awesome, everything's great. And then it's like, never mind, let's try this again. But it wound up being for the best because what happened is my broker had reached out and did like his broker things and found out through the grapevine that there was a space available that wasn't on the market. And it's because the landlord was holding it for a very specific type of business. And it wound up being the one that I'm in now. And it wound up being a much bigger space that was actually cheaper per square footage. And it is an amazing location in a really nice shopping center. And through negotiations, which were a little iffy back and forth eventually, but I finally was able to secure the space. And like I said, it wound up being for the best. And so that's how that started.
Yeah.
And then all the other fun stuff happened after that.
I think the reason that I know we've got a lot of points to get through today, but
Yeah.
the reason that I think that I wanted you to just talk about that just a little bit
Yeah.
is, again, I think so many times, and you probably remember me saying this to you a lot of times when I'm talking to doctors, I'm like, the hardest thing we will do is finding a location and getting through lease negotiations.
Yep.
And you going through that, losing a space. And I hate to say it, but it happens more times than not, whether it's some crazy things like what you had going on.
Yeah.
I've had spaces rented out to 2 different doctors and the landlord disclosing that they've got leases on the same space.
Yep.
With 2. I mean, like, it's just crazy. And I guess I say all of this just to say that a lot of times it feels like, man, you're just going through it and this is awful. And how am I going to come back from this? But I can tell you almost in every situation that I can think of, the second option ended up being the better option.
Yeah.
Like, there was a reason that happened. And in the long run, it actually ends up working out.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I want to lead into next, because not only do you make it through losing a space, a legal battle, getting into another space, but then on top of it all, you get hit with a little health whammy. Do you mind talking about that?
Absolutely. No, I could absolutely. I mean, that's a big one, but yes. So very shortly after I signed my lease, for a little bit, I had been experiencing some lower back pain and I was like chalking it up. Yeah, your dentist, your back's bad, like all that stuff. And it then continued to progress a little bit more and a little faster. And I started having some pretty significant pain in my lower back that then started radiating down as sciatic pain. And so during this time, I'm working 6 days a week. I'm trying to figure out how to open this practice. And then all of a sudden my back is starting to kill me, which is not really making me feel great about like spending all of this time, investment, and money and what's going on with me physically. And I was trying to figure out what was going on with my back, thinking that maybe I had some kind of herniation, something like that. And then was taking a little bit of time to be able to get an MRI. It was insurance style a couple times, wanted me to go to physical therapy. It wasn't getting better. And it was just continuing to get worse. And then I finally got my MRI. And this is, like I said, maybe 2 to 3 months after we signed the lease. And it was taking quite a bit to get permits and things like that ready to get submitted. And I got my MRI back, and I found out that I had an 8-inch cyst growing in the base of my spine that had probably been there for a while, but I guess it had reached a tipping point, and it was so large that it had compressed and eaten away the inside of my vertebrae from L4 to S4, and it was progressing very rapidly. And it was such a rare condition that I had that there was only 3 surgeons in the United States that treated it. And
Wow.
so during this time, it was very tough news, and it was challenging too, because I was still in New York and I had just gotten married the month before. And then I flew my husband down and we moved everything there. And my husband and my dog were living in Asheville. And then I flew back up to New York because I was continuing to work to finish up my cases. And then 3 days later, after I flew back up, I found out that this was going on. And so that was a big hit, and was basically just trying to scramble to figure out what was going on. And this is still working. The gears are still turning for this practice in the background. And I then continued to get worse and met with one of the surgeons. And I went to UPenn. Head of neurosurgery there is pretty awesome. And I went there and I met with him, and he looked at my imaging and said that if I did not try to do a pretty heroic and risky surgery, that I was going to be in a wheelchair in about 2 months.
Yikes.
Yeah, it was a lot. And so I basically had a lot going through my mind at that point, thinking, am I going to be able to work again? Is this going to be successful? It was a very risky surgery. Like I said, it was pretty massive what they had suggested, including like massive laminectomies and repairing my dura and free muscle flaps. And it was a pretty extensive surgery. But again, the other option was that I had no option. And I had to go through with it. And right before the surgery, as I was getting ready to do the surgery, which was scheduled to be a couple of months later, I had gotten so severe that I lost function in my left leg. So I was not really able to walk very much anymore, and still applying for permits at the same time. And I was just like, I just have to keep going. Yeah. I was like, I can't. I was like, I have to keep going. I'm like, this is just what has to be done. And so then I wound up having my surgery, and it was pretty extensive, and it wound up being incredibly neurologically successful. But I wound up regaining full function in my leg, which was amazing. And then I took an unfortunate turn. So about a week after my surgery, I then developed a massive tear and CSF leak in my spine, and then contracted a pretty horrific antibacterial resistant strain of meningitis, and became septic and almost died in the hospital. But luckily they were able to treat me, but they could not repair the surgery and the CSF leak, and it took a while. And so I wound up I was in the hospital, I think the surgical ICU, for about 8 weeks total, and had 6 total surgeries while I was there to try and repair what was going on. And it was pretty rough. Yes. And I wasn't sure if I was going to get out of there, but I kept persevering. My husband, you were speaking with him while I was there. He basically took over for my practice, and I was just like, just tell them to sign off on the cabinets. It's okay. It's just sign for me. But luckily I eventually did recover, but I was in for an incredibly difficult recovery after the hospital, because when I left, I was in pretty bad shape. I was very deconditioned. I had been supine, so basically I wasn't allowed to get up out of bed for 8 weeks. And after that, I had a lot of neurologic and vestibular deficits and really didn't know how to walk just yet.
Yeah.
So, and a few days before I got out of the hospital, the permits were approved. And so as I got out of the hospital, my contractor called me and he was like, all right, we're going to start construction. And I was like, all right, so you're going to get there. Cool. Let's get there.
And now a word from the sponsors who make this podcast possible. Hey docs, on this podcast, I talk about a lot of different ways you can set your practice apart. But here's one that might surprise you. Maybe you haven't thought about it before, but the equipment you use can make a big difference, not just for the patient experience, but for you and your team too. That's why I want to let you know about a new line of orthodontic equipment from ADEC. I visited their headquarters in Oregon earlier this year to take a sneak peek for myself, and I have to say, I was impressed. ADEC has manufactured award-winning dental equipment for 60 plus years, and they're bringing that same level of excellence to ortho. From comfortable, compact patient chairs to a versatile workstation and delivery to ergonomic dental stools, ADEC orthodontic equipment is designed for a smooth and easy workflow. Day after day, patient after patient, see the difference it can make for your practice. Click the link in our show notes to learn more about ADEC Orthodontic Solutions. Hey docs, let's talk about Smile Suite, because it's not just another scheduling system. It's a game changer in the world of new patient management. And as a proud Smile Suite partner, I've witnessed the incredible impact it has on practices of all sizes. Smile Suite means your new patient calls and web leads are expertly handled 7 days a week, even during nights and weekends. And they offer top-notch customizable presentation software and seamless post-consultation follow-up. It's like having a secret weapon for your practice's success. Curious? Dive into the revolution at GetSmileSuite.com. And don't forget to mention Hey Docs to unlock some extra goodies. Elevate your practice with Smile Suite, because every smile deserves a suite of excellence.
Exactly. And,
Yeah.
and just thanks for sharing that. And I know that's a lot, but again, I think so many times we can get, when you're thinking about doing this, there's so much that goes on, and just being able, I just admire you so much for being able to keep your head through all of that, continue to push through all of that, and never being like, forget it, I'm just going to stop it all here. It was still like, okay, we got to push forward. And I think one of the things that was a positive that did come out of that was that I think it gave you some really creative ways to start building, because now you think about it, okay, you're not in New York anymore. You've moved to a new state. You've gone through this pretty big health scare / trauma. Now you're in a new state. Now you've got a practice that's kicking off build. 16 weeks later, we're going to have a baby. We got to be ready to go.
Yeah.
And you've got to now start marketing the practice. You've now got to start moving into, okay, I still have my health issues, but I've got to switch my gear. So let's talk a little bit just about what you did to really help you as you moved past that, the health trauma, into, okay, I've got to build this relationship. I've got to get this practice open. Let's talk about that. And then on top of it all, I'm sure people are listening are like, you can't tell me there could be, and then.
There's so much.
But there is. And then let's talk about your first year, and just probably the biggest, I'll say biggest, like all of this is big, but what you went through in your first year with natural disasters as well.
Yes, that was another fun one. So I had a lot of time on my hands. So recovering and going to physical therapy and just trying to think of ways that I could really get myself out there. And I'm a very strange person in terms of when it comes to marketing. And we've had this conversation that I'm not very good with social media, or at least I try my best, because I have a lot of trouble doing things that I'm not sure if I'm being authentic. And I know that sounds strange, but that's just really the type of person that I am, that I really want there to be genuine connection with me and the people around me. And I wanted the way that I basically presented this practice to feel that way as well, because that's really what I wanted to do here with my patients. That's really what my practice is about, is where genuine interactions, genuine patients, genuine, I'm fumbling my words, genuine empathy, and
Yeah.
having that personalization and having that relationship. And so I was the new kid in town coming from New York, and I thought about what is the thing that I love doing the most, and in terms of my hobbies, and that's feeding people. I love to feed people and I love to bake, and baking has been such a massive hobby of mine. I've been baking since I was 5. I thought I wanted to go to culinary school at one point. Like, it was one of those, hey, maybe I'll do that. But I do it constantly. And it's one of my favorite things to create something and then feed it to people and to see them enjoying it. And so I know I needed to try and meet with the dentists in the community and really just get myself out there in a different type of way. And the way I did that is I baked everybody a pie.
Yep.
And a homemade pie. I baked about 80 or so pies. And what I did is, once I was starting to feel better and was able to be comfortable driving again, I would bake like 4 to 6 pies a night. And then the next day I'd pack them all in my car and I would drive all over Asheville and just show up to the practices in the area, introduce myself with a little bio card with this pie, and just be like, I baked you this pie. I'm going to be opening a practice. I would love it if you would enjoy this and tell me how it is. Just let me know if you like the pie. And people were so floored by that. And just the idea of putting yourself out there. And I think they knew that's not always easy for everybody. And seeing that I put in that effort, that homemade baked good, and showed up personally, spoke with the front desk, tried to speak with the doctors, it really started getting some kind of talking going. And people really appreciated it. And that was one of the big things. And I was doing it literally every single day, like 4 days a week. I would just drive and be like 4 pies, 6 pies, just drop them all off. And I had my list. And it was a lot. And I did it for 3 months straight. Just kept doing it, just kept baking. And that was one portion of it. The other thing that I started doing was, because I had all this time when I was trying to recover, was I got my website up incredibly early. So it was there. I started getting searchable SEO. I was starting to pop up on websites. I was there. I had a Google page very early. I started my Instagram page very early with little homemade advertisements popping up here and there, just telling people that I'm coming. And I started going to community events as well. I started meeting with schools. I started meeting with some of the autistic communities where they have some outreach programs, and telling my name, giving them my information, like saying, hey, I'm a special needs dentist. If you need someone that needs orthodontics, please let me know. And then I started sponsoring the community events around here, like the farmers markets, and they're huge down here. And I started doing that. I sponsored them for the year. I started setting up tents early, and I wasn't even open yet. And I'd just be like, hey, we're coming. Do you want a toothbrush? Here you go. Things like that, and just getting my name out. And the other thing that I did was I joined a women's business support group that was tailored to women-owned businesses in the area, where they held community events. I would set up tables. I would do like smile consults on the weekends and have everybody be coming up and just getting my name out really early. And what happened with all of that is, as we were getting towards opening, is I wound up having a wait list, which was pretty awesome. Yeah, I know it was
exactly what we want, if we can. And it was just doing that hard work.
Yeah.
None of that was easy. And I think that's the thing that I'm always telling docs is, if you're going to do a startup, none of this is easy.
It's not.
That unsexy side of the business where you're out. You may love bacon, but I have got to believe that after
I was so tired of making pies. Of course. Yes, it was a lot. My husband was just like, how many more eggs do we have to get again? And I'm just like, just get all of them. Just get all the eggs. Just keep buying eggs. But no, it's nothing easy. Nothing worthwhile is going to be easy. And I know that sounds very cliche. If it was easy, everybody would do it. But the thing about it is that even though this journey is so challenging, the reward is amazing. Like the amount of effort, like every single roadblock that you wind up hitting, and then seeing that what you've been able to do, how difficult it was, and that you were able to make it through is so important. And the funny thing is that I had such a drive after I got out of the hospital for that specific reason, was that I had made it out of the hospital. And it was while I was there, there's a thing I think that everyone kept saying to me where it's, oh, I couldn't go through what you were going through. I couldn't go what you were going through. And it really got me thinking while I was there that yes, you can. You know why? Because when you're in it, you have two options. You can just go into despair, or you keep going.
Yeah.
And when you're thrown into that situation, you just got to keep going. It's this, that's just really how I think about it.
And I think that has been, I've just loved being able to, in that first year, from the startup to the first year of your practice, really being able to go through that with you and just watching your tenacity and your grit to be like, okay, yes, I just got socked in the gut again. And, we're going to keep doing it. And at no point did you ever say, I just can't do this. I can't move forward.
Yeah.
Instead, it was, if it means I got to bake 6 more pies, then dang it, I'm going to make 6 more pies.
That's what I'm going to do.
That,
yeah.
What I love now is connecting, knowing that you're going into year 2 is it's to hear you say, Jill, you will not believe. And I'm like, what has that done for you? All that work in the beginning. I think this is the part that docs need to hear is it does pay off. And I want you to just talk just a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. It took a little bit of time. We also had construction delays and all that stuff and all these fun things that everybody, one thing after another. But when we finally opened, all of that work I had done, like I told you, we opened with a waiting list. And not only did we open with a waiting list, we broke even our first month of being open, which was just absolutely incredible. Yes. And we had such a amazing response from the doctors and the community. And I think having that tenacity and showing how much you care, the fact that I did that, I think showed that the dentists in the area, like that I really did care about what I was doing. It meant a lot to me. This practice meant a lot to me. It meant a lot that I could provide the services that I could provide. And I was just so happy to do it. And that was one of the big factors. And I think that there were some other factors that I think contributed to as well, was just the type of practice and the style that I opened and the services that I provide. With my background, with the craniofacial background, I'm really comfortable doing all of the crazy stuff. Yeah, I always joke, I'm like, you got something crazy? I was like, send it to me. I'll take care of it. And I was like, the more complicated, the better. Awesome. And so I've gained that reputation now too. When I initially opened, one of my biggest patients that were actually coming in was adults. So we started off with a massive influx of adults, like complex adult patients. And I think it really was coming down to they weren't 100% sure where they could go before. And there's a lot of really wonderful orthodontists in this area. And they're a little bit of a bigger practice, but they tend to cater a little bit more towards kids. They do treat adults, but I built a practice that catered to both. It had, like, with my design and just my services, I started seeing a significant amount of pre-prosthetic cases. I had TMJ cases. I treat a lot of TMJ in my practice. I do complicated TAD, all that fun stuff. I treat sleep apnea. I do orthodontics. I literally just, if you have it, I was like, I'll figure it out. And if I don't, I will ask someone and we'll find out what we can do for you. And that's always just been just like the way I work. I've always just trying to do the next thing. And I think that was incredibly helpful because I think there was a little bit of a need down here for that. And I think that was something that also really helped my practice in the beginning, was just the amount of services that I offered. Nobody really had all of those in one place. And I think that was really great. And I think it might have been a little bit of my style. I'm a little, like I said, I'm not everybody's flavor. I am covered in tattoos. I have blue hair. I'm a little, like I said, I'm a little off the beaten path, but I think that's Asheville. And I think it was really wonderful that patients could find a doctor that they could relate to. Yep. And that's really what's super important to me. I have a very casual style with the way that I practice, the way that I talk to everybody is the way that I am with my patients. I don't really subscribe to a big patient doctor hierarchy. Everything that I'm doing is very much on you and I are on the same level. I'm just here providing a service to help you. And that's what I'm here for. But this is a decision for both of us. And I also have a very strange way of trying to get people to sign up. I tell them to go home and think about it. And so it has worked, which surprisingly, Gina was like, no, are you sure you're doing that? And I was like, yeah, it's working out. It's just fine. And which is the opposite of what some people tell you is you want to try and sign patients up right away. But I guess I'm a little different. I like to think about stuff. And so when we have consultations, it's very much about the patient feeling comfortable about the decision. And we tell people like that all the time. We're like, hey, see if this makes sense. Go home, talk to your family. Like, we're not going anywhere. Yeah. And also get another opinion, right? That is your choice. If it winds up being that I am not the person that you resonate with, then that's awesome, because you have to hang out with me for a really long time if you're doing orthodontics. And I want to make sure that it's the right fit for both of us. And I think patients really appreciate that. Yeah. Especially around here. Yeah. And that's been, I think, also incredibly helpful. Just being authentic. I think patients see that I truly mean what I say. Yeah. And that's really just how I live my life every day. And that's how I bring into the consult room. Yes. And it's a lot of stuff.
I love that, because from the beginning, you had this vision of what you wanted to being authentic and being real, and you're not going to put on airs in front of the patients. And I think that has also helped you be very successful in your first 2 years of practice is not only in just being able to get yourself embedded in the community, but to gain that trust with the dentists and the other professionals in the area, but also to gain that trust with patients. And then from there, being able to see that they're advocating and speaking on your behalf without you even being around, which I think that is what we're all looking for.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
I always say I'd rather have 10 other people talking about me than trying to pay one marketing avenue to bring people to me. And I think you're like this perfect example of doing the hard work, working through it, getting out there, being authentic. And that in turn has turned out when you're going into your second year. I'll let you talk about that. And I still want to just real quickly talk about the one more adversity that you ran into in this first year. But I think because you did such a good job really immersing yourself in the community, we're able to, as a whole, as a community, come out of that. Do you mind just as we wrap up talking about that just a little bit?
Are you talking about all the fun construction fun stuff? or the hurricane that happened in our first year?
I want to talk about the hurricane. Because not only did, Dr. Liz here go through all the health stuff, but in her first year, we also had a very devastating hurricane that hit the community. And I think just rallying around, I'd like for you to just talk a little bit about what that was like to just rally around those patients and rally around, oh my gosh, I may not have had a lot of damage at my office, but I had families that were devastated. Do you mind just talking about that?
No, of course. That was a really difficult time for my whole practice. Obviously, everybody around us, my staff, and it was really just surprised everybody. And we were basically stuck. I was very lucky with the practice. We had damage to my house. My staff was luckily okay, but all of Asheville was under 26 feet of water in some parts. And we had basically our infrastructure just evaporated overnight. We had no cell service, no electricity, no running water, no way to communicate, not really knowing if anybody was okay. And in those initial stages, just really being focused on just wondering if everyone was okay. That was really the initial stages. And not being able to communicate with patients became incredibly challenging. We would try and find hot spots of areas of cell service where I would post on Instagram, just telling everybody that I hope you're all okay. And if you need us, if there's any emergencies, like we hope everybody's safe, just try and message us here. We'll see if we might not get it for a few days, but that was it was very challenging and very emotional for a lot of people. And then I was quite lucky with the practice being that because we were in a commercial lot, we did wind up getting power back to the practice about a week after the hurricane, but still no cell service and no running water. And I was able to try to open up for emergencies and posted as, hey, if anybody just needs like a safe place where you need some snacks and you need some water and you need to charge your electronics, like just please come to the practice, and just trying to do whatever we could. And then eventually we were starting to slowly be able to communicate with very small pockets of cell service. And the minute that I was able to get my office running, I was trying to stay open for everybody. And we were communicating. My front desk, she wound up getting internet back at her apartment before anybody, because she lived in Arden and didn't get hit as hard. And so we were basically communicating where I was at the practice trying to use 1 bar of cell service. She was calling the patients, booking them that needed to come in for emergencies, not knowing what my schedule looked like because we still didn't have any internet. And then I would just go back and dictate. It'll be like, hey, they came in, tell them they need to come back in 6 weeks. And we did that for an entire week. And I was spending an exorbitant amount of money on bottled water, just trying to keep it going and being able to flush the toilets. And it was very surreal. And then the really difficult part was just every time I saw another patient come in, I was just so grateful that they were okay. And then the stories that I would just hear of people going through, there was a lot of crying in my office between me and my patients, my assistants, a lot of hugs. And it was definitely really hard. It was our first year open. And the funny thing is that it happened a few days after we had just had our first year anniversary party, which was a huge hit. I baked a lot of stuff, and we had a live band, and we had a bar, and it was a really fun party. And then we were challenged with this, but it took time, just like anything. And we're still recovering from it down here. It's going to take many years for it to fully recover, but I have never seen a community rally the way that I did down here after that hurricane. The amount of support that everybody was showing was pretty magical. We got through it and eventually got our internet. We were able to contact our patients again. Still took a really long time to get water. Yes, it took almost 2 months for us to get running water back. So a lot of bucket baths going on. We were all living like pioneers over here.
Exactly. And Liz, I just so appreciate you sharing this story, because I
Thank
think so many times now, I hope for all of my docs that nobody has to go through the extremes
for sure.
that you did. But gosh, I just think you can really get through it in the grand scheme of it. You just gotta keep your head down and keep going, and you will come through on the other side. And I'm just wondering, as we finish up, if you could, I don't know, just maybe speak to any of the doctors out there that's maybe stressing or having second thoughts about, should I do this? Should I not? Maybe you're 2 years in now, talking about, okay, when I look back, excluding all of the craziness, would I do it again? Do you mind just wrapping us up with that?
Absolutely. I think the thing to remember is that you could go literally mad trying to make a decision. And it's very easy to get hung up on that one decision. Should I? Shouldn't I? And it can go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And no matter what happens, things will always occur in your life that are going to be difficult. You can't control everything that's going to happen, but fear and anxiety are feelings for a reason. They can either stimulate you to move, or you will be frozen in place and probably get eaten by a lion. For me, I know how that feels, because I was in that position where I was paralyzed by it for a while. And even though it was one of the hardest things that I've ever done in my life, I have never been this happy and proud and content and just excited about what I'm able to do here, because it took so much effort. And because of that, it's worth so much more. And you have to remind yourself that you have the capability to do this. And also, you don't have to do it alone. You can have Jill, who is the most wonderful human being and has had so many conversations with me. It's just remember that you build a support group, right? You have family, friends. I love going on Facebook, talking with other orthodontists. Like, it's an incredible resource there. People talking about their experiences. Find a mentor. And I've actually surprisingly, I've been mentoring another orthodontist that's opening a practice that's also in North Carolina, just a bit far away, and finding people that have had these experiences and getting their advice. But the other thing to remember is just stay true to yourself. Stay true to what your vision is, what makes sense for you. Lots of things will be around you. People are going to be doing one thing over here. People are going to be doing one thing over here. Don't worry about what they're doing. Just worry about what makes sense for you.
Yes.
And I think that's the really important thing is, what if you are true to yourself and you are authentic, you will be successful because patients see that.
Yeah.
People see that.
Yes.
They see through it. They see through it if you're full of it.
Yeah. Such sage advice for sure.
Oh man, can you see all my gray? Because that's probably from the last 2 years.
But you're doing great and you're on the other side and putting up incredible numbers. And I think even though it is not just about the numbers that we're putting up, I think it really is about all of the other things. Being able to go to work and be like, I really love what I do. I'm really happy about what I was able to build and just imagine the impact you're going to have on your community 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 12 years from now.
It's been awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
It's been really awesome.
As we finish up, the way this is just, I know you and I could just talk, and I'm sure people would be like, okay, let's hear something else. You're dropping these great pearls with us, but we do have to bring it to an end. So the way I like to finish it up is with a little speed round. Are you ready to?
Oh man, okay.
Do a little speed round. Okay.
All right. I'm usually bad at these type of questions, but I'll try my best.
It'll be easy. What is one daily habit or ritual that helps you stay productive or balanced?
So I have two. And so I wake up pretty early every morning, a lot earlier than I probably need to. And the reason why is because a lot of times when I wake up, my mind is usually buzzing all over the place. And so one of the first things I do in the morning is I make my coffee, I sit on the couch, and I turn on a really bright sun lamp. And I just sit there. I sit there with my coffee, no phones, no nothing. And I just let the light shine on me. And what it does is it really helps wake my brain up and get ready for what's going to happen for the rest of the day. And I find it incredibly calming, but also it stimulates me enough where I'm like, okay, I got this. Yes. I do that every single morning. And then my evening one is that I have to take a bath every single night. That's my wind down. That's where everything that has just occurred throughout the day is then going to leave.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. All right. What is one piece of advice you wish you had followed earlier in your career?
Oh, that's a hard one. You know why, though, is because people used to say, again, when do you open a practice? Should have opened it earlier. Should have done this earlier. I've been hearing it from everyone. And advice is obviously really wonderful, but the truth is that advice doesn't really make sense unless you decide that you want to follow it, or if you've made the decision that this is the right time. And so sometimes you can get as much advice, but if you haven't made the decision for yourself, it's just going to keep going one ear and out the other. Yeah. And so that's how I think about it. But yes, I probably should have tried opening a practice earlier than 40, but I'm here now. And I feel like it was the right time, though.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And then to finish us up, one last question. Do you have a go-to strategy for getting unstuck if you're facing a tough problem?
I'm a big person that talks things out. And I, not only to myself, but to other people, I'll be sitting there and I'll just be having a conversation about different scenarios. And that's really how I work through things. But I'm also the type of person that I ask for the people around me their advice. I ask my team, I'm like, hey, how do you guys think about this? You think this will work? Or I ask my husband, or I go online and I talk to other orthodontists and say, hey, how would you handle this situation? And I'm not the type of person that I'm just going to, if I don't feel like I'm making the right decision, then I'm going to just take a step back until I can get the full picture of it. But yeah, I just never shut up. I think that's really the big thing.
This has been just so wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
I appreciate it.
Being a little vulnerable here. What I hope is Yeah, it's just letting people know that like you can go through tough stuff and come through on the other side and still do just fine. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being on today.
No, thank you so much for having me. It really, like I said, it really means a lot. And it's so nice to see your face again. I haven't seen it in so long. So
All
lovely.
right.
Your hair is longer. My hair is longer. It's just
I know.
so much time has passed.
Right. All
But
right. Thank you so much.
bye, Jill.